Hello folks, welcome to our unit on all hazards preparation, or what used to be referred to as emergency preparedness. Your reading assignment for this unit is pages 179 through 187 in your text. This unit will be 2 weeks long, so you have 2 weeks to complete that reading. The learning objectives for this unit are numerous and a bit wordy. I recommend pausing the video and reading through them on your own before continuing on, because it may help you to understand them a little bit better. The objectives are to describe disasters or public health emergencies that impact public health, including the different types, along with the general health, safety, and security risks. Describe the all hazards framework. Explain key components of personal, family, institutional, community, and regional disaster preparation and planning. Describe communication strategies and procedures used in a disaster, including barriers to communicating and disseminating health information, reporting systems, and procedures for contacting family, coworkers, and local authorities. And to describe the purpose and relevance of disaster support services, including rationale for integration and coordination of all systems like the NRF, NIMS, and the HICS system. Still more objectives for this unit are to describe the impact of mass casualties on health resources, including infection control precautions, PPE, and decontamination procedures. Explain the role of triage as a basis for prioritizing or rationing health care services for victims. Describe the possible medical and mental health consequences, interventions, and solutions for managing those affected. Explain both the basic life-saving and life support principles and procedures that can be used at a disaster scene. Describe issues relevant to the management of individuals of all ages, populations, and communities affected by a disaster or public health emergency. And to describe the support roles of a surgical tech in a disaster. So let's start off with some basic terminology surrounding hazard preparedness. An emergency is a more geographically isolated event that can be handled by local emergency services like ambulances, fire departments, and paramedics. Versus a mass casualty event, which is when the number of victims overwhelms the human and material capacity of the available healthcare services. A disaster is a catastrophic event that affects a large portion of the population and poses significant risk to humans and property. So a level 1 disaster is when local emergency teams are able to manage the immediate consequences and aftermath of the event. A level 2 disaster requires regional assistance from the surrounding communities. And a level 3 disaster requires the assistance of statewide and federal agencies because the effects of the disaster have overwhelmed the local and regional resources. So you see that the disasters get more and more severe the higher a level that they are. Disasters can be broken down into 3 different types: natural, man-made, or a combination of the two. Natural disasters arise from a force of nature. They're the most common type of disaster, and they are frequently unique to a geographic location. That is, certain natural disasters are seen more frequently in certain regions. For example, avalanches are seen most frequently in the Rocky Mountains, compared to a region of the country that has no mountains. An avalanche is when snow slides down the side of a mountain. It can cause many problems, including highway blockages and injury or death to anyone that's caught in its path. Most of us are familiar with winter storms since we live in the Midwest and usually experience 1 or more winter storms each year. So, a winter storm is characterized by dangerously low temperatures, poor visibility, and bad driving conditions. During a winter storm, ambulances may have difficulty reaching people. On the flip side of that, heat waves are characterized by an extended period of abnormally hot weather. During a heat wave, there's a danger of dehydration, sunburn, cramping, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. Heat waves can sometimes result in wildfires. The damage from wildfires can cause food shortages and destroy homes and businesses. They can also cause respiratory and cardiovascular conditions to worsen due to smoke inhalation. Earthquakes are experienced along the fault lines of our Earth. The shaking of the Earth can cause buildings to collapse and sometimes catch on fire. People that are victim to earthquakes may be injured by falling items or structures and need treatment for the lacerations, fractures, crushing injuries, head injuries, and other things like that. There's also potential for people to become trapped in fallen buildings. So earthquakes can sometimes cause tsunamis, which are large waves that can travel for miles before dissipating. If it hits land before dissipating, it can cause major damage, injuries, and death. Tsunamis can also be caused by volcano eruptions. When a volcano erupts, it releases poisonous gas and molten rock. It also spews a large plume of ash, which can cause burns and respiratory problems in people. The ash can also make driving difficult, and if mixed with melting snow, can end up becoming a mud flow. So just a few more natural disasters here. Tropical storms and hurricanes are both very intense thunderstorms. Hurricanes have higher wind speeds, over 74 miles per hour. They produce large, heavy rains, storm surges, and high winds. People may be injured by flying debris, and there may also be drowning victims as well. Hurricanes and tropical storms can cause flooding due to rapidly rising ocean water. Flooding can also be caused by heavy rainfall or snowmelt, which then overwhelms streams or rivers. Tornadoes can cause property damage and injury or death to those in their path. Injuries may be from flying debris, collapsing structures, or from being thrown about by high winds. Infectious disease could also be considered a natural disaster. Disease can spread quickly between people and could potentially overwhelm the resources to care for the ill. Some examples include the flu, H1N1, and Ebola. An epidemic is an outbreak of an infectious disease that is unexpectedly large but still limited to a certain area, versus a pandemic, which is like an epidemic, but the affected area is much larger, like the entirety of the country, the continent, or even the world. So now that we've gone over some natural disasters, let's talk about some examples of man-made disasters. Chemicals released can cause severe damage to the environment and can cause life-threatening injuries to people. The chemicals can be flammable, toxic, or caustic. A chemical release disaster could be accidental. For example, a semi-truck carrying caustic chemicals could crash and release those chemicals accidentally. It could also be a form of modern terrorism if the chemicals are released intentionally in order to cause harm. Explosions can be this way too. Accidental explosions happen when there are explosions of factories, mines, or gas tanks. They could also be from intentional sources like bombs. Infrastructure incidents occur when buildings, roads, or bridges collapse. This could be secondary to natural disasters like earthquakes, floods, tornadoes, and things like that. It could also be due to poor maintenance or construction. Your book states a couple of great examples on this. The I-35 bridge collapse in Minneapolis a few years ago, if any of you remember that, as well as the failure of the levee system during Hurricane Katrina. Radiation is released in disaster proportions with the detonation of a nuclear or dirty bomb. It can also be released as a result of an accident at a nuclear power plant. Radiation exposure can cause injury from the blast itself, like burns and blast injuries. But radiation exposure can also cause mutations in body cells, which leads to cancer. Transportation accidents reach disaster proportions when multiple vehicles are involved. Your book talks about a pileup of 34 vehicles in icy Colorado. Terrorism is defined as the unlawful use of violence or threat of violence to instill fear and to coerce governments or societies. It's attempted through the use of different types of weapons, including chemical and biological warfare. So it isn't always black and white when deciding if a disaster is natural or man-made. For example, the flooding in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina could be considered a combination disaster. The hurricane itself was a natural disaster, but the failure of the levee was man-made, an infrastructure disaster. So how do we know that we are personally ready and prepared in case of disaster? It's the responsible thing to research and be sure that you know what kinds of disasters are common in the area you live. In addition to knowing what to expect, it's important to know what recommended actions or procedures you should be ready to use. For example, here in the Midwest, we experience occasional tornadoes. It's good to know that we normally experience them in the spring or summer, and it's recommended that people wait out the storm in their basements. Also, since tornadoes frequently cause power outages and downed trees across roadways, it's smart to keep flashlights and batteries in a convenient spot. Some people may even have personal backup generators. Since the downed trees may make getting to the grocery store difficult, it's also smart to have a supply of non-perishable food and bottled water on hand. In order to prepare for disaster, family plans should be developed for each type of emergency that you may experience in the region in which you live. Kids should know how to call 911 and how to get out of the house in an emergency. Adults should know their insurance policies, including health, life, disability, and homeowners insurance. Adults could also be more prepared for disaster by becoming certified in CPR and basic life support. So we know from our past unit on communication that it is so important if everything is going to run smoothly. When could it be more important for things to run smoothly than when you're trying to respond to a threat of disaster for your family? Many types of disaster cause power outages, resulting in decreased availability of technology as a communication tool. Even when there are no power outages and there's a disaster, cell towers will commonly be overwhelmed by family and friends calling to check on the safety of their loved ones. It may be difficult to get through using cell phones. For this reason, it's important to have a meeting place decided upon ahead of time. Nearby parks, parking lots, and bus stops are good meeting places. The family home is not always the best meeting place because some disasters may result in the loss of the home. You should also designate an out-of-town relative or trusted friend to act as a communication center. Everyone should know this person's phone number, email address, and home address. And this person's able to pass on needed communication between separated family members when they're not able to communicate using other means. So a go bag is a bag packed with the most essential items for 72 hours of survival. It's pre-packed in case of emergency and can be grabbed at a moment's notice. It should have bottled water and non-perishable food. It should have some cash and a flashlight with extra batteries. A battery-powered radio and walkie-talkies are good items for your go bag as well. A battery-operated radio and first aid kit are good additions, as well as documentation, providing communication information about everyone in the family, as well as the out-of-the-town family member or trusted friend that was designated as your communication center. Don't forget to include 72 hours worth of supplies for your pets as well, dog food and any medication the dog or cat are taking. All the supplies in a go bag should be gathered at home as well as part of an essential supplies store. The supplies in the home will be similar to what you find in a go bag, but in larger quantities. So your discussion board assignment this week encompasses the idea of a go bag, so we're going to stop here for this week. We'll pick up again next week with the second half of our hazard preparedness unit. Thanks, and I hope you're having a great week.